What's up, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Addiction Network. In this video, we're going to be going over one of my breakout players of the year, Daniel Jones, quarterback for the New York Giants, discussing what his fantasy outlook for 2020 should be. Now, before we get started, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button for more content like this, but let's get into breaking down Daniel Jones. Now, last year, came into the NFL, everyone was expecting him to be a complete flop, and he was pretty much anything but. He did have a very big problem with fumbling and interception, so like that's definitely something that he is going to have to work on. Honestly, we paid less attention to it just because Jameis Winston was over there setting records with his 30 interception season, but Daniel Jones was definitely up there in terms of total turnovers for his team, so that's something he's going to have to work on. But he was a rookie, so we can typically expect rookies to have a bit of positive regression to their second season in terms of ball security. We're expecting there to be less fumbles, less interceptions this year, at least on a total rate. Now, in his first season, he only played 12 of 16 games. He missed the first couple of games being benched behind Eli Manning. Once he took over towards the end of the season, he missed 2 games due to a high ankle sprain. And one of the games he was playing, he actually had injured it during that game. So technically, he had missed about 5 games if you take that into consideration as well, but played a total of 12 games and finished with respectable stats. Over 3,000 passing yards, on pace to break the 4,000 mark, is something not a lot of rookie quarterbacks can say. Was scoring touchdowns at a pretty high clip, on pace to score over 30 touchdowns in his rookie season. Had he played a full season, it likely could have eclipsed that mark, finishing with 24, 12 interceptions, and the 279 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Finished with 14th in fantasy points per game. That's the more relevant number to pay attention to here, as he didn't play the whole season. Now, when we look at his game by game stats, this is basically the Amari Cooper of quarterbacks. So he basically either finished as a top 3 quarterback on the week, or he wasn't even a quarterback 1 outside of the top 12. And from a consistency standpoint, I typically don't like players that are this boom bust, but hear me out. Let me explain why I think things could be a bit better this year. Last year was a very bad year for the surrounding talent of the New York Giants. Daniel Jones only had 4 games where he was able to play with all 3 of his receivers and Saquon Barkley healthy. And I say that even knowing that Saquon Barkley wasn't healthy for like 4 or 5 games that he played. He was still clearly dealing with that high ankle sprain. Evan Ingram as well missed a good portion of the season last year, so Daniel Jones was not able to play with a full supporting cast. Now, surprisingly enough, when healthy, the combination of Saquon Barkley, Evan Ingram, Darius Slayton, and Sterling Shepard, that group is actually the fastest skill position group for the offense in the entire NFL, even faster than the Kansas City Chiefs in terms of just pure speed. So this is a incredibly talented wide receiver and running back room. Daniel Jones, if he's able to actually be able to play a season with the majority of his weapons, we could see a lot more boom weeks from him, and clearly showing that he has that potential to completely dominate on a week by week basis. Again, 4 weeks where he finishes as a top 3 quarterback, like this was your DFS guy. And if you just play matchups alone, taking Daniel Jones later in your drafts to be able to hedge against, when you have, if you have another quarterback that has a bad matchup, like Daniel Jones is that perfect guy of a streaming candidate. But if he has multiple games towards the beginning of the season where he does blow up, he's probably not going to be someone that's going to be left on waivers for the entire season. So there is the element too where he's going to come in and he has a pretty tough first 3 weeks stretch where he's probably going to be on waivers. So he's not someone that I'm absolutely requiring you to go after in drafts, because I think his fantasy relevancy will begin from week 4 onwards. Just again, playing Pittsburgh and San Francisco in the first couple weeks is not a really good way to start the season out. But again, we're projecting the way defenses will be. those defenses could take a massive step back, or Daniel Jones could also take a massive step forward. So I'm still targeting him in my drafts if I can get him late enough. I'm just taking another quarterback around like Jared Goff that has a easier start to a season that I can at least play in case the beginning of the season for Daniel Jones is rough. But when we look at some of the metrics too, some of the positives about Daniel Jones, last year he finished with 4.3 deep ball attempts per game. That was 15th, pretty average there, but he had 18 money throws, which considering he only played 12 games and finishing 12th at that spot. They call him Danny Dimes for a reason, and that's the reason right there. Finishing with 6th most rush yards per game at 21.5. Play action completion percentage and pressure completion percentage both in the top 12. And then his protection rate last year was pretty atrocious at 72.3%. So obviously the Giants spending their first overall pick on a tackle is something to note as well. There should be increased ability among the offensive line this year, and we're not really expecting their defense to really be any better either. So if you give him a healthy Saquon Barkley, a healthy Darius Slayton, a healthy Sterling Shepard, and an improved offensive line, it's really hard not to project him to have a bit more consistency week over week. And if he carries those boom weeks for you, even if he can only hit 4 to 6 boom weeks like he had last year, if he's able to at least be more consistent week over week, that's going to be a quarterback that's going to be someone that is definitely worth owning, because if you can hit the top 3 at the position on a week by week basis, that can win you a week, especially when it's a guy that you're not having to pay, anything in the top 10 rounds. You can typically get Daniel Jones from the 11th round onwards, someone so you can get pretty cheaply, but still carries that week winning upside for you. That's the reason why I like Daniel Jones a lot this year. So we actually have him projected to finish the season out. I still feel like this is probably closer to his floor. 4,000 passing yards, 26 passing touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 334 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. Obviously, those rushing touchdowns could be a bit volatile. Last year he had 2 in 12 games, so that could go up to 3, 4, possibly even 5. Averaging a lot of rushing yards is another reason why we're expecting his floor to be a bit higher this year. If he is able to keep the fumbling and the interceptions down, that'll also help keep him closer to that low quarterback 1 week when he's not blowing up, and then still have the ability to have an absolute boom week. And you can expect the boom weeks to come because their defense is so atrocious that they're going to have to score a lot of points and air it out if they want to actually compete week in, week out. Now, if Jason Garrett ends up being the main play caller there, I think that could be a bit concerning, but overall we have seen a lot of productive fantasy quarterbacks with Jason Garrett. I don't think Jason Garrett is a very good coach overall, but from a fantasy perspective, he hasn't really been a net negative. He's been really good for the running game overall, but hasn't had, there's plenty of years that Tony Romo was a very relevant quarterback. Dak Prescott has been incredibly consistent from a fantasy perspective. So I don't really see why that would be too much of a negative for Daniel Jones as well. I think the talent is there. The fact that their defense is bad is going to play to positive game script for Daniel Jones to have plenty of fantasy points this year. So it could definitely hit above where we have him projected right now, and could creep into that top 8, top 6 quarterbacks this year, especially if someone ends up faltering that we have projected ahead of him. So someone you can get really, really cheap, really late in drafts that I really like a lot this year. And curious to see what you guys think as well. So hit me up in the comment section below if you have any questions, and we'll see you guys in the next video.